You are standing at a street stall in Mumbai. A vendor is selling you a cup of chai for 12 rupees. You reach for your wallet, out of habit, looking for a card. He points at a small paper square taped to his cart. A black and white QR code, curling at the edges, sun-bleached, stuck next to a photo of a Hindu god. You take out your phone instead. You scan it. You type 12. You tap. Done. No card swipe, no signature, no terminal, no fee. Now here is what just happened, and why two of the most powerful companies in the history of money should be terrified of a chai stall in Mumbai. That transaction cost the vendor nothing. Zero. Not a percentage, not a flat fee, not a hidden markup baked into your 12 rupees. If you had paid with a Visa or a Mastercard, that transaction would have taken a cut. That is the entire business. That is how Visa is worth $600 billion. That is how Mastercard is worth $450 billion. Every swipe, every tap, every transaction on Earth running through their networks, quietly taking a small percentage that adds up to some of the most profitable businesses that have ever existed. But in India, that machine is breaking, not slowly, not at the edges. It is being dismantled transaction by transaction by a payment system that is not a company, has no shareholders, was not built by a billionaire, and was never designed to make anyone rich. It was built by the Indian government to make Visa and Mastercard obsolete. And it is working faster than almost anyone in Silicon Valley or Wall Street predicted. If you enjoy videos about monopolies hiding in plain sight and the systems quietly tearing them apart, hit like and subscribe so you never miss one. Because this story is bigger than India. This is a preview of what happens to Visa and Mastercard everywhere, once a government decides that payments should not be a business at all. To understand how strange this is, you first need to understand how good Visa and Mastercard's business actually is. Neither company prints money, moves money, or lends money. They do not carry risk on their books the way a bank does. They own something simpler and more valuable: the rails. The invisible plumbing that lets a card swiped in Lagos talk to a bank in London in under 2 seconds. Every time that happens, a small percentage of the transaction, usually between 1 and 3%, gets skimmed off the top and split between the card network, the issuing bank, and the payment processor. It sounds small. It is not small. Multiply that sliver across trillions of dollars in global transactions every year, and you get two of the highest margin businesses on the planet. Visa's net margins regularly sit above 50%. Mastercard's are similar. For comparison, a typical retailer is thrilled with a 5% margin. Visa and Mastercard make more profit on the transaction than most stores make on the product. Together, these two companies process roughly 85% of the world's card payment volume outside China. It is one of the most durable duopolies in modern capitalism. For decades, nobody could touch it. Banks needed them. Merchants needed them. Consumers had no alternative that fit in their pocket. The moat was not the technology. The moat was that everyone was already standing on their bridge, and there was no other way across the river. And that moat was built deliberately, over decades, by two competitors who eventually realized cooperation was more profitable than war. Visa did not start as a tech company. It started in 1958 as Bank Americard, a paper credit card mailed out cold to 60,000 people in Fresno, California, by Bank of America, with no application process and no credit check. It was reckless. Fraud was rampant in the first year, but it worked, and by 1976, the network had been spun out and renamed Visa, a word chosen specifically because it was pronounced almost the same way in every language on Earth. Mastercard's origin was almost a direct reaction to Visa's head start. In 1966, a group of rival banks that did not want to be locked out of Bank Americard's growing network banded together and formed their own competing association, first called Interbank, then Mastercharge, then finally, in 1979, Mastercard. Two networks, born out of competing bank alliances, spent the next 40 years quietly wiring themselves into every cash register, every airline counter, every hotel front desk on the planet, until using anything else felt almost impossible. By the 2000s, the two of them were not really competing with each other in any meaningful sense. They were co-managing a duopoly, each taking a cut, each protected by the same moat. Everyone else was already using them. Then India built its own bridge and gave everyone a key for free. In April 2016, an Indian government-backed organization called the National Payments Corporation of India, NPCI, quietly launched something called the Unified Payments Interface, UPI. It began small, 21 participating banks, a clunky app called Beam. Nobody in Bangalore, let alone New York, thought this was a threat to anything. It was, on paper, just a way to move money instantly between bank accounts using a phone number or a simple ID instead of a 16-digit card number. For the first few years, that is all it was. A convenient way to send your friend money for dinner. The real detonation happened in January 2020, when the Indian government made one decision that changed everything. It set UPI's merchant fee, the equivalent of what Visa and Mastercard charge, to zero, permanently. By law, no fee for the shopkeeper, no fee for the customer, a payment rail that businesses could adopt for free, forever. Think about what that meant for the tea stall, the vegetable cart, the roadside tailor, the millions of small merchants across India who could never justify paying 2 to 3% to a card network on top of already razor-thin margins. Suddenly, they did not have to choose between accepting digital payments and keeping their profit. A 10 rupee QR code sticker did the same job a card machine used to do, and it cost the merchant nothing per transaction. Adoption did not grow. It exploded. The numbers now are almost difficult to process. In January 2026 alone, UPI processed over 21.7 billion transactions, worth roughly $340 billion, averaging around 700 million transactions a day. UPI has already overtaken Visa as the world's largest real-time payment system, both in the number of transactions processed and in total value moved. On a single day in mid-2025, UPI processed more transactions than Visa's entire average daily global volume. UPI now accounts for roughly 85% of all retail digital payments inside India. Visa and Mastercard combined hold a shrinking sliver of what remains. And here is the number that should really worry two companies built entirely around taking a cut. UPI is growing at roughly 40% a year. Visa, globally, is growing at around 10%. One of these companies is playing a different game with a different rulebook, and the other one built its entire empire on a rulebook that no longer applies inside the largest population on Earth. But the truly brutal part of this story is not the app. It is what the Indian government did to Visa and Mastercard's biggest weapon, trust. In April 2018, the Reserve Bank of India, the country's central bank, quietly issued a new rule. Every foreign payment company operating in India had to store its transaction data exclusively on Indian servers, not processed abroad and copied back, stored, physically, inside the country, so Indian regulators could access it without needing permission from a company headquartered in another country. Mastercard resisted, arguing, reasonably from a business standpoint, that duplicating global infrastructure just for India was expensive and unnecessary. Visa complied. Mastercard, along with American Express and Diners Club, dragged its feet for 3 years. In July 2021, the RBI ran out of patience. It banned Mastercard, indefinitely, from signing up a single new customer in India. Not a fine, not a warning, a full stop. Existing Mastercard holders were unaffected, but every new debit card, every new credit card issued in India, from that point on, had to come from Visa or the domestic network, RuPay. Somewhere in a bank branch in Mumbai that same week, a loan officer who had spent years defaulting every new customer onto a Mastercard product had to start handing out Visa and RuPay applications instead, because the paperwork for Mastercard simply stopped being valid. Multiply that one branch by every bank in the country, and you get a sense of how fast 11 months of frozen growth compounds. Mastercard was frozen out of new customer growth in one of the largest and fastest-growing card markets on the planet for 11 months, until it finally proved compliance in June 2022. A U.S. trade official reportedly called the move draconian. India did not care. It had just demonstrated in the plainest possible terms that global card networks operate in its market on India's terms, not the other way around. By the time Mastercard came back, the ground underneath it had already shifted. RuPay, the domestic network born specifically to compete with Visa and Mastercard, now handles around 38% of all credit card transactions in India by volume, up sharply in just a few years, quietly taking share directly from Visa, Mastercard, and American Express. And RuPay has a weapon those companies do not. It is the only network allowed to link a credit card directly to a UPI transaction, meaning it rides on the same free, universally accepted rails that the T-stall already uses. You can watch the psychological toll of all this in Mastercard's own words. In 2026, a senior Mastercard executive in India told a reporter, almost resigned, that the company had stopped trying to compete with UPI on raw transaction volume. Instead, Mastercard is pivoting its Indian business towards something else entirely: cybersecurity consulting, fraud analytics, loyalty programs, value-added services layered on top of a payments business that used to be the whole point. That is the equivalent of a highway toll company admitting the government built a free bypass road and deciding its new business model is selling road signs. It is not nothing. But it is not what Mastercard came to India to do. And here is where this story stops being a local Indian curiosity and starts being a genuine global threat. UPI is not staying inside India's borders. As of 2026, it is live or linked in more than 8 countries: the UAE, Singapore, France, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Mauritius, and Qatar. In the UAE, tourists and Indian residents can already tap their Indian bank account at outlets like Dubai Duty Free and major supermarket chains. No card, no conversion fee, no Visa or Mastercard in the transaction chain at all. In France, of all places, tourists near the Eiffel Tower can pay with UPI. Every one of those transactions is a transaction that, a decade ago, would have gone through a Visa or Mastercard terminal, generating a fee for an American company. Now it does not. This is the nightmare scenario for both networks, and it is worth saying plainly. Visa and Mastercard have spent decades treating card payments as almost a law of physics, a fee that simply exists between a buyer and a seller because that is how money moves. India has just demonstrated, at a scale of 1.5 billion people, that the fee was never a law of physics. It was a choice, enforced by the fact that nobody had built a cheaper alternative. Once a real alternative exists, and once that alternative starts exporting itself to other countries through trade partnerships and diaspora demand, every other government watching starts asking the same question India asked in 2016. Why are we paying an American company 2% to move our own citizens' money? Brazil has already built its own answer. In 2020, the country's central bank launched a system called PIX, deliberately modeled on the same free, instant, government-run idea as UPI. Within 3 years, PIX had become the most used payment method in Brazil, ahead of cash, ahead of debit, ahead of credit cards entirely, processed by more Brazilians than any bank app or card network had ever managed on its own. Card companies in Brazil watched a decade of projected growth simply not happen because a free public alternative arrived before they could lock in the next generation of customers. The United States is now scaling its own version, a system called FedNow, backed by the Federal Reserve, still early, still nowhere near UPI's adoption curve, but built on the same premise: instant, bank-to-bank, no card required. Europe has gone further and made a version of this mandatory, a system called SEPA Instant, requiring banks across the continent to support free, real-time transfers. None of these systems are UPI. None of them are moving at UPI's speed, and none of them have UPI's 10-year head start. But every single one of them exists, in its current form, because a government somewhere looked at what India built and asked whether the same thing could work at home. UPI did not just solve a problem for India, it became the reference document every other central bank now keeps open on their desk. Now, before this turns into a simple story of good government infrastructure slaying evil American monopolies, there is a twist worth sitting with. Because it is the same kind of twist that always shows up once you look closely enough at a monopoly falling. UPI itself has a concentration problem. Despite being a public, government-built rail, the actual apps that most Indians use to access UPI, the interface between your thumb and the payment, are dominated by two companies, PhonePe and Google Pay. Together, they control more than 80% of the UPI market. One of those two companies is Google. An American company, NPCI has tried repeatedly to cap any single app's market share at 30%, precisely because regulators are worried about recreating the same kind of chokehold UPI was built to destroy, just with a different logo on top. So far, that cap has not stuck. Which means the real ending of this story is stranger and more honest than India beat America. India built a public road that anyone can drive on for free. And two American technology companies, not banks, not card networks, quietly became the two biggest cars on that road anyway. The toll booth is gone, but somebody still controls the traffic. Still, for Visa and Mastercard specifically, none of that changes the fundamental math. Their business model, take a cut of every transaction, forever, has been broken in the one country on earth with more consumers than any other. It has been exported to at least 8 more, and it is being copied by governments from Brazil to the United States who watched what happened and asked, quietly, why can't we do that too? So let's go back to where we started. You are standing at a stall in Mumbai, chai in hand, phone back in your pocket. 12 rupees, sent for free, through a system a government built specifically so that companies like Visa and Mastercard would never get to touch that transaction. Multiply that moment by 700 million times a day, and you start to understand why two of the most profitable companies in financial history are, for the first time in their existence, playing defense in their own industry. The card in your wallet still works. Visa is not going anywhere tomorrow. It is still one of the largest companies on earth, and outside a handful of markets, its business is as strong as it has ever been. But the model that built Visa and Mastercard, the assumption that moving money must always come with a toll, has just been proven wrong, in public, at a scale of 1.5 billion people. And once an idea like that escapes into the world, it does not go back in the bottle. If this video changed how you think about the card in your wallet, hit like and subscribe for more, and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And I want to know, if your country built its own version of UPI tomorrow, free forever, no card required, would you actually switch? Or is the card in your wallet worth more to you than the fee it's quietly taking? Drop your answer in the comments.